Emma set her cup of tea on the table just as she heard a knock at the door. It wasn't loud, just gentle, but enough to make her heart jump. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her evenings were usually quiet, spent reading a book or catching up on work. Curious, she walked across the small apartment and opened the door. Standing there was her neighbor, Daniel. He lived next door, but they had never spoken much beyond polite greetings in the hallway or a quick nod when checking mail. Emma had always noticed his calm presence, the way he carried himself with a certain stillness, but she never thought he would knock on her door. His eyes, though, looked different that evening, soft, almost troubled, as if he had been holding something inside for too long. "Sorry to bother you," he said quickly, almost as if he wanted to take the words back. His smile was faint, but it didn't hide the weight he carried. Emma tilted her head, curious yet cautious. She wasn't used to surprise visits, but something about his tone felt sincere. "That's all right," she replied gently. "Do you need something?" Daniel hesitated, his hand brushing the doorframe as if he wasn't sure whether to stay or walk away. I didn't want to be alone tonight. I thought maybe talking might help, if that's okay with you." For a moment, Emma hesitated. Letting a neighbor inside wasn't something she usually did, especially one she barely knew. But the honesty in his voice touched her in a way she couldn't explain. He wasn't there to sell something. He wasn't making excuses. He was simply asking for company. "Of course," she said softly, stepping back and opening the door wider. Daniel gave a quiet nod of thanks and walked inside. Emma closed the door behind him, still wondering what had brought him here. He glanced around the room, his gaze falling on the warm lamplight, the books stacked neatly by the sofa, and the window where soft evening light spilled through. Emma gestured toward the couch. "Please sit down. Would you like some tea? I just made some." "That would be nice," Daniel answered, his voice low but steady. As Emma moved to the kitchen, she could feel the strange shift in the air. Her evenings were normally predictable, calm, sometimes even lonely. Now, there was someone else in her space, and it stirred something inside her chest she hadn't expected. When she returned with a second cup, Daniel was sitting quietly, hands resting on his knees, eyes distant. She placed the cup in front of him and sat across, waiting for him to speak. "Thank you," he said, wrapping his hands around the cup, but not drinking yet. His eyes flickered to hers, and then he looked away. As if the words he carried were too heavy to say out loud, Emma leaned back slightly, keeping her voice calm. "It's all right. You don't have to explain everything. But if you want to talk, I'll listen." Daniel let out a small breath, almost like a sigh of relief. "It's been quiet in my apartment since my relationship ended. At first I thought I could handle it, just keep moving. But lately the silence has been too much. Tonight it felt like the walls were closing in. I don't know why, but I thought of knocking here." Emma's chest tightened as she listened. She knew the feeling of silence that carried weight. She had spent years pretending her evenings didn't feel empty, telling herself she was fine with her independence. Hearing Daniel say those words, she felt an unexpected connection. "I understand," she said softly. "Sometimes silence feels heavier than words." He nodded slowly, finally taking a sip of tea. For a while, neither of them spoke, but it wasn't uncomfortable. There was a strange comfort in simply sharing the same space. Knowing they didn't have to fill every second with conversation, Emma studied his face in the quiet. Daniel wasn't someone who opened up easily, that much she could see. There was a strength in the way he carried himself, but tonight it was layered with vulnerability. And maybe that was why she didn't feel uneasy letting him in. "You've been here for a while, haven't you?" he asked after a pause, his voice lighter now. "Yes," Emma replied. "Almost 3 years. It's a nice building, though sometimes too quiet." Daniel's lips curved slightly, the first real smile she had seen from him that evening. "I guess I'm not the only one who feels that way." Their eyes met, and Emma felt something stir inside her, a spark of recognition. The kind that comes when two people share the same unspoken truth. She looked away quickly, trying to steady her thoughts. Daniel leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "I wasn't sure if I should knock. I almost walked away twice before you opened the door." Emma let out a soft laugh. "Well, I'm glad you didn't. Sometimes we need to step out of our comfort zone." The air between them shifted again, subtle but noticeable. What began as an unexpected visit now felt like the beginning of chores, as if the beginning of them had planned but couldn't ignore. Emma stood to refill their cups. Her mind already racing ahead. She wasn't sure where this moment was leading, but she knew one thing. This evening had already broken the rhythm of her usual routine. Daniel's presence wasn't just filling the silence, it was changing it when she returned. Daniel looked more at ease, though his eyes still carried the weight of his earlier words. He took the tea with a quiet thank you, and Emma sat again, this time closer than before. The clock on the wall ticked softly, the world outside dimming into dusk. Inside, though, Emma felt something awakening, a curiosity, a warmth, a sense of connection she hadn't felt in a long time. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight, her neighbor's unexpected knock had already given her more to think about than she ever imagined. And as Daniel began to speak again, sharing fragments of his story, Emma leaned in, listening not just with her ears, but with her heart. The next evening, Emma sat by her living room window, watching the golden light stretch across the sky. The world outside seemed calm, but her thoughts were far from it. She kept replaying the moment Daniel had stood at her door, his voice carrying a quiet weight. She had never imagined her neighbor, someone she barely knew, would open up to her like that. Yet here she was, thinking about his words long after he left. A soft knock pulled her out of her thoughts. She knew it even before opening the door. Daniel stood there again, this time without the heavy hesitation in his eyes. He looked tired, but his smile was gentler, as if last night had taken away some of the burden. "I hope it's not too soon," he said. Emma shook her head. "Not at all. Come in." He stepped inside, and the room seemed warmer instantly. Emma offered him tea again, and he nodded, though this time his eyes roamed the window. He walked toward it, hands in his pockets, staring at the fading light. "Beautiful evening," he said, quietly. Emma joined him, standing just a step away. "Yes, it feels." Softer than yesterday, they sat by the window with their cups. And Daniel started to talk not about the silence of his apartment this time, but about his life before it. He spoke of growing up in a small town, moving to the city for work, the dreams he once carried. His voice was calm, but Emma could hear the traces of disappointment he tried to hide. "I thought I had it figured out," he admitted. "A stable job, a relationship that seemed solid. But somehow life had other plans." He gave a small laugh, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Now I'm here trying to put the pieces back together." Emma listened carefully. She wasn't someone who rushed to give advice. Instead, she let him speak, giving him the space to untangle his own thoughts. When he paused, Emma looked out at the city lights beginning to flicker on. "You know," she said softly, "we all imagine life will follow a straight line. But sometimes the curves lead us to places we didn't know we needed. Maybe this is one of those places for you." Daniel turned to her, and their eyes met. There was a stillness in that gaze, the kind that carried both gratitude and something deeper. Emma quickly looked back at her cup, her cheeks warming. Silence fell, but it wasn't heavy. It was the kind of silence that made room for breathing, for being present. The sound of cars outside, the distant laughter of children in the courtyard, and the faint whistle of the wind through the trees filled the spaces between them. Emma broke it first, smiling faintly. "It's funny, isn't it? We've lived next to each other for over a year, yet it feels like tonight I'm meeting you for the first time." Daniel chuckled softly. "I thought the same thing. I guess life waits until we're ready." Emma tilted her head, curious. "And do you feel ready now?" His smile faded into something more thoughtful. "I don't know. But being here, talking to you, it feels lighter than being alone. That has to mean something." Emma's chest tightened at his honesty. She didn't say it out loud, but she felt the same. Her own evenings had been quiet, filled with books and television, but little real connection. Now, sitting here, she realized how much she had missed simply talking with someone who listened and cared. As the evening deepened, their conversation shifted. They talked about simple things, favorite movies, books they had read, the little quirks of neighbors in the building. Daniel laughed more now, his shoulders loosening, his voice carrying warmth. Emma found herself smiling too, her heart lifting in ways she hadn't expected. At one point, Daniel leaned back, sipping his tea slowly. "You have a gift, Emma," he said, his tone serious. "A gift?" She asked, surprised. Double quotes, "Yes. You make people feel at ease. I walked in here with a weight I couldn't carry, and now, somehow, I feel lighter. That's not something everyone can do." Emma blinked, touched by his words. "Maybe it's just because I understand what it feels like," she admitted. "I know what it means to sit in a quiet room and wonder if life is passing by." Daniel studied her for a moment, and then nodded, as if he finally saw her beyond the polite smiles they used to share. The clock ticked on, but neither of them noticed. The sun had completely set, and the window reflected their images back at them. Emma saw herself sitting close to Daniel, her posture relaxed, her expression soft, almost vulnerable. It startled her, the realization of how natural this felt. Daniel set his empty cup down and leaned forward slightly. "You know, I wasn't sure what I was looking for when I knocked yesterday. I just knew I needed someone to remind me that I'm not invisible." He paused, his voice dropping. "And you did that." Emma's heart skipped. She wanted to say something light, something that wouldn't reveal the storm inside her chest. But instead, the words slipped out softly. "You're not invisible, Daniel." Not at all. The way he looked at her then made her breath catch. His eyes held a warmth, a quiet recognition that made the air between them feel charged. Neither of them moved, yet everything felt different. Emma quickly glanced away, standing to collect the cups. "I'll make more tea," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Daniel didn't argue. But when she returned, the moment still lingered, delicate but undeniable. They didn't speak of it directly, but it sat between them, quiet and alive. As the night grew later, Daniel stood to leave. "Thank you, Emma," he said sincerely. "Not just for the tea. For listening, for making me feel like myself again." Emma smiled, though her heart ached with unspoken thoughts. "You're welcome. Anytime." He hesitated at the door, as if he wanted to say more, but then simply gave her a gentle nod and stepped into the hallway. The door closed softly behind him, leaving Emma alone again, but not in the same way as before. She stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street below, her mind replaying every word, every look they had shared. Something had shifted. She could feel it in her chest, a stirring she hadn't felt in years. Daniel's visit wasn't just about easing his silence, it had touched something in her too. And as she turned off the lights and prepared for bed, she realized that she would not sleep easily. His voice, his eyes, his presence lingered, giving her something new to think about, something she wasn't ready to name yet but could no longer ignore. The rain started in the late afternoon, soft at first, then steady, drumming against the glass of Emma's window. She curled up on her couch with a blanket, listening to the rhythm outside. The world felt quieter in the rain, and her thoughts wandered back to Daniel. His visits had left her restless, her heart carrying questions she wasn't ready to answer. Just as the sky grew darker, another knock echoed. Her pulse quickened. She didn't need to guess who it was. She opened the door to find Daniel, rain droplets clinging to his jacket, his hair damp. "Sorry," he said, slightly out of breath. "I didn't bring an umbrella." Emma stepped aside instantly. "Come in before you catch cold." He smiled, grateful, and slipped off his wet jacket. The room filled with the sound of rain as he settled on the couch. Emma brought him a towel, and he ran it through his hair, laughing softly at himself. "You must think I'm impossible," he said. Emma shook her head, sitting across from him. "No, I think you needed company." He looked at her, his eyes holding a warmth that made her breath falter. "Yes, that's exactly it." The rain tapped steadily on the windows, filling the silence between them. Then, almost without warning, Daniel leaned forward, his expression serious. "Emma," he said quietly, "I don't know why I keep ending up here. Maybe because this is the only place I feel at peace. Or maybe It's because of you. Her heart raced. Me, she whispered. He nodded, his voice steady now. When I'm here, I don't feel broken. You listen, you see me. And I can't remember the last time I felt that. Emma's hands tightened around the mug she was holding. She had been careful all her life, cautious with her feelings, protecting her heart. But his words reached deep inside, pulling at a part of her she had long buried. She wanted to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Daniel's gaze held hers, steady, waiting. The rain outside only made the moment feel sharper, as though the world had gone still for the two of them. I feel it too, she admitted softly, almost afraid of her own confession. These evenings with you, they've changed something. I didn't realize how much I was missing until now. Daniel leaned back, running a hand across his face as if trying to steady himself. I wasn't sure if I should say it, he confessed. I didn't want to risk this. Whatever this is, but I couldn't keep it inside anymore. Emma's chest tightened. She understood. She had felt the same tug, the same hesitation, afraid to give a name to what was slowly growing between them. Yet now, hearing him say it aloud, she could no longer pretend it wasn't real. The room grew quieter. The sound of rain, the only witness to their shared confession. Emma stood to pour more tea, her hands trembling slightly. Daniel watched her, his eyes softer now, filled with something she didn't dare put into words. When she sat again, he leaned closer, his tone gentler. Emma, I don't want to rush you. I know this is new, but I also know that being near you feels right. And I don't want to ignore that. Emma's heart ached. She wanted to tell him she felt the same, but her fear whispered louder fear of being hurt, of losing the calm she had built in her quiet life. Still, she couldn't deny the truth inside her chest. I'm afraid, she admitted, her voice shaking. Daniel nodded slowly. So am I, he paused, then added, but maybe that's a sign it matters. Their eyes locked. And in that moment, the air between them felt fragile, charged, almost sacred. Neither moved, yet everything had shifted. Emma could feel her heart opening in ways she hadn't allowed in years, and it terrified her as much as it thrilled her. The rain grew heavier, rattling against the window, but inside the room, time seemed to pause. Emma finally smiled faintly, breaking the weight of the moment. You really do have terrible timing, Daniel. You show up soaked in the rain and then say things like this. He laughed, the sound warm, and for a moment, the tension eased. But beneath the laughter, the truth still lingered raw. Undeniable. They spent the rest of the evening talking again, though their words carried a new weight now. Every glance, every pause seemed to hold more meaning. They shared memories, fears, and small hopes for the future, their voices blending with the rhythm of the rain. At one point, Daniel said quietly, I don't know where this will go, Emma. I just know that when I'm here, I feel alive again. And that's enough for me right now. Emma looked at him, her chest tightening with unspoken emotion. Then let's start with that, she whispered. The night stretched on, and eventually Daniel rose to leave. He stood at the door, his jacket still damp but his eyes brighter. He hesitated, as if the weight of leaving was heavier than the rain outside. I'll see you soon, he asked softly. Emma nodded, her lips curving into the smallest smile. Yes. He gave her one last look filled with quiet promise before stepping into the hallway. The door closed gently, leaving Emma alone once more. But she wasn't the same as before. The air in her apartment still carried his presence, his words echoing in her mind. She pressed her hand against the window, watching the rain slide down the glass, her heart alive with both fear and possibility. For the first time in years, Emma felt the stir of something new, fragile, yet real. Daniel's confession had unsettled her, but it had also awakened her. And as she lay down that night, the sound of rain still in her ears, she knew she would not forget the way he had looked at her, nor the way her heart had answered. Quietly, but undeniably, something had begun between them, something neither of them could take back. And deep inside, Emma knew this was only the beginning. The morning after the rain, the world outside Emma's apartment was washed clean. sunlight reflecting on wet streets, glistening leaves, and small puddles along the sidewalks. She stood by the window, sipping her coffee, thinking about Daniel and the way the previous evening had ended. His words, the way he had looked at her, the quiet tension that had lingered, it all replayed in her mind like a movie she couldn't pause. A knock at the door startled her. Her heart leaped immediately. She knew who it was before she even opened it. Daniel stood there, umbrella in hand this time, a small, genuine smile lighting up his face. He looked different in the daylight, softer, approachable, more open than ever. "Good morning," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I thought I'd bring some fresh air inside, even if it's just me." Emma laughed quietly, stepping aside. "I'm glad you did." They settled near the window again, sunlight spilling into the room. For a few minutes, neither spoke. It felt as though the room itself held its breath, letting the two of them exist together quietly. Then Daniel broke the silence. He said softly, "I keep thinking about last night, about us. I can't ignore this feeling anymore. I've tried to, but it's not going away." Emma felt a flutter in her chest. She had been thinking about the same thing, trying to push it aside, but every glance, every word between them made it impossible. "Neither can I," she admitted. He looked at her, eyes searching, and she realized how close they had come, not physically, but in a way that mattered more. The emotional closeness, the trust, the quiet moments, they had formed a bond stronger than either expected. "I don't want to rush," Daniel continued, "but I also don't want to pretend this isn't real. Sitting here talking with you, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time, something good." Emma's lips curved into a small smile, warmth spreading through her chest. "I feel it too," she whispered, unsure why it sounded so vulnerable to say aloud. They talked then, more openly than before. Daniel shared small stories from his childhood, memories of his family, and even a few of the silly mistakes he had made while trying to navigate life. Emma laughed genuinely, the sound mingling with the sunlight streaming through the window. She felt lighter, freer, as if each word shared between them dissolved some of the barriers she had built around her heart. When Emma spoke, she found herself opening up too. She shared her own quiet struggles, her loneliness during evenings spent alone, the longing for connection she rarely admitted to anyone. Daniel listened intently, never interrupting, never judging. His presence felt safe, comforting, and something about that safety made her heart ache with hope. The conversation shifted naturally into what they both wanted, not just in life, but in each other. Daniel spoke carefully, choosing words that carried honesty and vulnerability. "I don't want this to be complicated. Just want to be near you, to share things with you, to see where this goes," he said. Emma nodded, swallowing hard. "I want that too. I've spent so long alone thinking I could manage by myself. But now I don't want to manage alone anymore." There was a pause, filled with the soft sound of birds outside and the faint hum of the city in the distance. Neither of them spoke immediately, letting the words settle between them, letting the feelings take root. It was quiet, but it was enough. Daniel finally leaned back, a gentle smile on his face. "You've given me something to think about, Emma. More than that, I think you've given me a reason to hope again." Emma's heart lifted at that. She had felt it too, the flicker of hope that had begun the moment he first stepped into her apartment weeks ago. It had grown steadily, slowly, until it became impossible to ignore. "I feel the same," she admitted softly. "You've reminded me what it feels like to truly connect with someone, to feel seen." Their eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to pause. The city outside went on, people rushing by, cars passing, the world moving forward. But inside Emma's apartment, everything else faded. There was only Daniel and the quiet understanding growing between them. "I don't know what the future holds," Daniel said quietly, "but I want to find out with you." Emma's chest swelled with emotion. She had feared letting herself feel, feared the vulnerability it demanded. But hearing him say those words erased much of that fear. "Then let's do that," she whispered. For the next hour, they sat together, talking about small dreams, hopes for the days ahead, even the simple things they wanted to do over the coming weeks. Every word carried warmth, every glance held meaning. Emma realized that what had started as a simple visit from a neighbor had become something far deeper, something that could grow into love, trust, and companionship. As the afternoon light began to fade, Daniel stood to leave, but this time there was no hesitation. He looked at Emma, his eyes steady, a quiet promise in his expression. "I'll come back soon," he said softly, his voice carrying more than just a casual remark. Emma smiled, feeling her heart flutter. "I'll be here." He stepped into the hallway, pausing at the door to look back one last time. Their eyes met, and in that brief moment, everything unspoken was understood. Connection, hope, possibility, all lingered in the air between them. Then he left, the door closing gently behind him. Emma stayed by the window, watching the sunlight fade completely and the streetlights begin to glow. Her heart was full, her thoughts racing, but a calm happiness settled over her. She realized that life had a way of surprising her, of opening doors she never expected. Daniel's visits, his words, his presence, they had awakened something in her that she had long ignored. Sitting back on the couch, Emma reflected on everything that had happened, the unexpected knock, the conversations that grew deeper, the moments of laughter, the quiet confessions, and finally, the sense of hope she now felt. It had all led to this moment, a turning point she hadn't known she needed. She smiled softly, thinking about Daniel and the quiet power of simply showing up, of opening up, of taking a chance. She knew that, whatever came next, her life had already shifted. She had felt connection, trust, and the stirrings of love, and that was something worth holding on to. As night fell, Emma closed her eyes, letting herself imagine the possibilities. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. She felt seen, she felt understood, and she felt the quiet thrill of something new beginning, something delicate, beautiful, and entirely her own. And she knew, without a doubt, that her neighbor's visit had given her more than company or conversation. It had given her something to think about, something to hope for, and a new chapter waiting to be written with Daniel by her side. That's part 4 expanded to approximately 1,000 words. Emotional, romantic, dramatic, fast-paced, simple, mature, and fully safe for YouTube monetization. If you want, I can now create 5 YouTube-optimized titles and 5 thumbnail text ideas for this full story designed to attract clicks while staying monetization-friendly. Do you want me to do that next?